Welcome back to SERA Self Discipline. I am glad you pressed play today. And before we get into today's episode, I want to ask you something. When life gets hard, and it will get hard, it always does, what do you do? When the cold comes, when the plan fails, when the comfort disappears, when the world stops cooperating with what you want, who do you become in that moment? Do you shrink? Do you complain? Do you wait for conditions to improve before you begin again? Or do you have something inside you, some core, some bedrock, that actually gets harder when conditions get harder? Because that is the difference between a man who is disciplined when it is convenient and a man who is disciplined when it costs something. And the world is full of the first kind. The second kind is rare. And the second kind is what we are building here. Today we go north. We go to Scandinavia. We go to a people who lived in one of the harshest, coldest, darkest environments on Earth and did not merely survive it. They forged one of the most extraordinary cultures of courage, resilience, and mental toughness the world has ever seen. Today we study the Vikings. Not the Hollywood version. Not the axe-swinging caricature. The real Viking culture. The philosophy behind it. The mindset that turned darkness and hardship into fuel for an extraordinary life. And I promise you, by the end of this episode, you will look at your own difficulties very differently. Let us get into it. First, let us understand the world the Vikings inhabited. Because context matters enormously when we study any culture's philosophy. The Norse people lived in Scandinavia, modern-day Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and parts of Finland and Iceland. These are lands of extreme winters, months of near-total darkness, brutal cold, unpredictable seas, thin soil that made farming difficult, limited resources, a world that did not offer comfort or abundance without enormous effort and risk. And yet, from this harsh environment, they produced explorers who reached North America 500 years before Columbus. They produced traders whose networks extended from Greenland to Constantinople. They produced craftsmen of extraordinary skill, poets of remarkable depth, a legal and democratic system, the thing, the assembly, that was one of the earliest forms of representative governance in the world. And yes, they produced warriors whose fearlessness in battle was legendary across 2 continents. None of this happened despite the harshness. It happened because of it. The Norse culture was shaped by its environment in the deepest possible way. Their philosophy, their religion, their stories, their values, all of it was a direct response to living in a world that was beautiful and brutal in equal measure. And their answer to that world was not to soften it or escape it. Their answer was to become someone equal to it. That is the first and most important lesson from Viking culture. The world will not soften for you. The question is whether you will harden for the world. Not harden in the sense of becoming cold or closed. Harden in the sense of developing the capacity, the strength, the resilience, the inner resources, to meet whatever the world brings without being broken by it. Now let us go into the Norse philosophical and spiritual framework. Because the Vikings were not a people without a rich inner life. Far from it. Their mythology, the stories of Odin, Thor, Frigg, Freya, the Norns, and the world of Yggdrasil, was a complete philosophy encoded in narrative. It was how they made sense of existence, suffering, courage, and fate. And when you look at it closely, it is one of the most honest and unflinching philosophies of life ever developed. The Norse cosmos was not designed for comfort. Unlike some cosmological systems that promise ultimate salvation, eternal paradise, or the final triumph of good over evil, the Norse framework ended in Ragnarok. The end of the world. The gods themselves would fall. Odin, the All-Father, knew this. He saw it in his visions. He knew that even he would die. And his response to that knowledge was not despair. It was preparation. It was constant striving. It was the relentless cultivation of wisdom, courage, and strength, not because it would ultimately save him, but because it was the right way to live until the end. Let that settle. The highest god in the Norse pantheon knew he was going to lose. And he spent every day preparing, learning, sacrificing, pushing forward anyway. There is a word for this attitude in modern philosophy. It connects to the Stoic amor fati we discussed in episode 4. But the Norse version is rawer, grimmer, and in some ways even more powerful. It is the decision to act fully and courageously in the face of guaranteed difficulty, because the acting itself is what gives life its worth. not the outcome, the act. Odin was relentless in his pursuit of wisdom. He sacrificed one of his eyes to drink from the well of wisdom. He hung himself on the world tree Yggdrasil for 9 days and 9 nights, wounded, in agony, without food or water, in order to discover the runes, the source of deep knowledge. He chose suffering deliberately in order to gain understanding. He was not a god of comfort. He was a god of relentless, sacrificial striving. The message for you is direct. Wisdom costs something. Growth costs something. The man who wants to develop without discomfort, who wants to level up without sacrifice, who expects the benefits of discipline without the price of discipline, he misunderstands the nature of things at the most fundamental level. The Norse gods themselves paid the price. No one is exempt. The cost is not a bug in the system. The cost is the system. Now let me introduce you to a concept from Norse culture that I believe is one of the most powerful frameworks for self-discipline and mental toughness you will ever encounter. It is the concept embedded in the Norse word hugur. Hugur does not have a direct English translation. It refers to the animating spirit of a person, their courage, their will, their inner vital force. It was understood to be something that could be cultivated and strengthened through how you lived. A man who lived courageously, who faced his fears, who did difficult things, who kept his word and met his obligations without flinching, his hugur grew stronger. A man who fled from difficulty, who sought comfort above all things, who allowed fear to govern his choices, his hugur weakened. This is remarkable because it encodes a psychological truth that modern neuroscience is only now catching up to. Every time you do a difficult thing, every time you choose the hard path when the easy one is available, you are literally strengthening your capacity for future difficulty. And every time you flee from difficulty, every time you take the comfortable exit, you are weakening that capacity. The courage muscle works exactly like the physical muscle. Use it and it grows. Avoid using it and it atrophies. The Vikings understood hugur as a living thing inside a man, something that had a presence others could perceive. A man of strong hugur walked differently, spoke differently, made decisions differently. He was not louder or more aggressive. He was more settled, more certain, less at the mercy of circumstance. Because he had built something inside himself through accumulated acts of courage and endurance that could not be taken from him by external events. Think about the men you most respect. Not necessarily the most successful by external measures. The most genuinely formidable. The ones who seem unshakable. Who have something in them that holds steady when everything around them is moving. That quality, that settledness, that inner gravity, is what the Norse called hugur. And it is built the same way they built it. Through consistent, voluntary encounter with difficulty. Through choosing the hard thing when the easy thing is available. Through keeping your word even when it costs you. Through showing up fully even when no one would notice if you did not. Every choice you make is either building your hugur or weakening it. That is the Norse framework. And it is one of the most honest and useful frames for understanding self-discipline that has ever been articulated. Let us now talk about the Norse concept of wyrd, often translated as fate. Because how a culture understands fate tells you everything about how they approach action, effort, and personal responsibility. In many philosophical traditions, the concept of fate leads to passivity. If everything is predetermined, why strive? Why effort? Why discipline? But the Norse relationship with fate was completely different. The Norns, the three weavers of fate at the root of Yggdrasil, wove the threads of destiny for all beings. But the Norse did not interpret this as a reason for passivity. They interpreted it as a reason for total commitment to action. Their reasoning was this: you cannot know what your fate holds. You cannot see the threads being woven. What you can do is ensure that however the threads fall, you have shown up fully. You have fought with everything you had. You have held to your values. You have not made fate's work easy by handing it a coward. Whatever comes, and it will come, let it find a man who was not found wanting. This is why the Viking warrior went into battle not desperate to survive, but determined to be worthy. The question was not whether he would live or die. That was in the hands of the Norns. The question was whether he would be the kind of man who deserved to be remembered. And being remembered, having a legacy, a good name, a story worth telling, was perhaps the highest value in Norse culture. There is a verse from the Hava Mal, the sayings of the High One, Odin, that captures this precisely. It says, "Cattle die, kinsmen die, the self must also die. But the good name never dies for one who achieves a good reputation. Cattle die. Kinsmen die. You will die. The only thing that outlasts your body is the reputation you built through how you lived. Not what you accumulated. How you lived." In a culture where the afterlife was not guaranteed paradise, but a warrior's hall that you earned through deeds, Valhalla was not given, it was won. Every single day of your life was understood as an opportunity to build the reputation and the legacy that would define you beyond your physical existence. Now you do not need to believe in Valhalla to find this framework profoundly motivating. Ask yourself, if the story of your life were told honestly, from beginning to end, with nothing left out, would it be a story worth telling? Not a perfect story. Not a story without failure. But a story of someone who tried, who showed up, who built something real, who met difficulty without flinching, who was the same person in private that they claimed to be in public. That is the Vikings' Valhalla. That is the reputation that does not die. Let us now talk about a practice from Norse culture that is directly applicable to your self-discipline today. It is called hardening, and in the Norse world it was a literal, deliberate, systematic process of exposing oneself to discomfort in order to build the capacity for greater challenges. Norse warriors would train in winter conditions deliberately. They would expose themselves to cold, to hunger, to exhaustion, not because they had to, but because they understood that the man who has never been cold does not know if he can function in cold. The man who has never been hungry does not know if he can think clearly when hungry. The man who has never been exhausted does not know if he can make good decisions when exhausted. Voluntary hardship is the Norse tradition's version of what the Stoics called negative visualization and what modern performance psychologists call stress inoculation. You deliberately encounter difficulty at a manageable level so that your response to greater difficulty is not panic, collapse, or flight, but the calm, competent response of someone who has been here before. This is why cold exposure practices like cold showers and ice baths have become so popular in modern high-performance culture. Not because cold showers make you healthy, though there are physiological benefits, but because the act of choosing discomfort voluntarily trains the huger. It trains the part of you that wants to flee, that screams for comfort, that demands the easy exit, and it teaches that part of you that you are in charge. Not it. The Vikings were doing this 1,000 years ago. They understood intuitively what neuroscience now confirms, that the capacity for self-governance is trained through voluntary exposure to discomfort. Every time you choose the cold, every time you hold the difficult position, every time you endure something uncomfortable that you could have avoided, you are not just surviving that moment. You are changing who you are in future moments. You are building the man who does not need ideal conditions to perform because he has trained himself to perform in non-ideal conditions. Start small. A cold shower. A difficult conversation you have been avoiding. A commitment you make and keep even when it becomes inconvenient. One extra set when your body is telling you to stop. The specifics matter less than the pattern. The pattern is, meet voluntary discomfort with voluntary choice. Expand your capacity through deliberate practice at its edges. That is hardening. That is how the huger grows. Now I want to talk about community, because the Viking philosophy of self-discipline was never individual in isolation. It was always embedded in a web of mutual responsibility and loyalty. The Viking community structure, the clan, the ship crew, the Jarl's Hall, demanded that every man pull his weight. Not because they were watched, because the survival of everyone depended on it, and because a man who did not pull his weight was a man who had no honor, and a man without honor had nothing. The Norse concept of frith, often translated as peace but meaning something closer to communal harmony and mutual protection, meant that your personal discipline was understood as a contribution to your community. Your strength made your community stronger. Your weakness made it weaker. Your reliability made the people around you more secure. Your unreliability threatened them. This is a frame that modern individualism has almost entirely lost. We think of self-discipline as a personal project, something we do for our own benefit, our own body, our own career, our own goals. The Norse understood it differently. Your discipline was a gift to the people who depended on you. Your commitment to excellence was a form of service to your community. When you were at your strongest, the people around you were safer and stronger for it. Think about this for your own life. Who depends on you? Not just financially. Who needs you to be at your best? Who benefits when you are disciplined, focused, clear, strong? And who is harmed when you are not? Your discipline is not just about you. It ripples outward. To your family, your team, your community. The man who takes his self-discipline seriously because he understands it as a form of service to others has a deeper motivation than the man who is only doing it for himself. He has something to fight for beyond his own ego. And that kind of motivation does not quit. Let us close today with the most important Viking concept of all. The one that underlies everything we have discussed. The Norse word is drengr. It is pronounced approximately as drengr. And it meant something like, a man of quality, a man of honor, a good man in the fullest sense. To be called a drengr in Norse society was one of the highest compliments you could receive. It meant you were someone who faced difficulty with courage, who kept your word, who treated others with honesty and fairness, who did not boast but delivered, who showed up when it was hard, who was the same man in private that you were in public, who bore hardship without complaint and met good fortune without arrogance. Notice what is not in that definition. Wealth is not in there. Status is not in there. Success by external measure is not in there. A drengr could be a poor man who lived with complete integrity. He could be a man who failed in his enterprises but met the failure with dignity. The definition is entirely about character. About the quality of a man's inner life as expressed through his consistent external choices. That is the Vikings' ultimate self-discipline framework. Not a routine. Not a system. A standard of character that governs every choice you make. The question the drengr asks is simple. Is this the choice of a man of quality? Is this what a drengr would do? Would a drengr hit snooze when he set his alarm with intention? Would a drengr speak behind someone's back when he would not say it to their face? Would a drengr abandon his commitments because the conditions became difficult? Would a drengr treat his private hours differently from his public ones? You know the answers. You always do. The question is whether you are building the habit of consulting that standard in the real moments, the ordinary moments, the moments when no one is watching and the easy choice is right there. The Vikings lived in a world that was dark for months at a time. Literally dark. The sun barely rose. They did not wait for the light to return before they chose to be men of quality. They chose it in the darkness. They chose it in the cold. They chose it when the sea was against them and the land was frozen and the odds were impossible. That is who they were. Not because the world was good to them. Because they decided who they were going to be regardless of what the world gave them. So let us bring it all together. What does the Viking philosophy teach you about self-discipline in your life today? It teaches you that hardship is not the enemy of your growth. It is the material of your growth. The cold, the difficulty, the setback, the failure, these are not interruptions to your development. They are the development. You do not grow despite them. You grow through them. The man who understands this does not dread difficulty. He recognizes it as exactly what he needs. It teaches you the concept of hugr, that your inner courage and will is a living thing that you either build or erode with every choice you make. Every act of courage builds it. Every act of avoidance weakens it. Your choices are not neutral. They are constructive or destructive to the person you are becoming. There is no standing still. It teaches you the Norse relationship with fate, that you cannot control what happens, but you can control who you are when it happens. Show up fully. Live so that whatever comes finds a man who was not found wanting. It teaches you hardening, that voluntary discomfort is the training ground of real resilience. Seek difficulty. Expand your capacity. Train at the edges so that when the real difficulty arrives, and it will, it finds a man who has been practicing for this his whole life. It teaches you frith, that your discipline is a gift to your community. Not just a personal project. A form of service to the people who depend on you and need you to be at your best. And it teaches you to be a drengr, a man of quality, not by any external measure, by the internal standard of character that governs every choice you make regardless of who is watching. The world will be cold again. The darkness will return. The question is not whether it will come. The question is whether it will find a man who is ready for it. This is SERA Self Discipline. Episode 6. The iron does not choose to be hard. You do. Deep mind. Real grit. I will see you in the next one.